Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to grant thy blessing upon the works of this council. Guide us in our deliberations for the advancement and the true welfare of the people of this district. Thank you. Just remind, if a council member has an interest in a matter before council, they're asked to disclose the interest to council and provide full and accurate details of their relevant interest. And members are reminded to declare their interest before the actual item arises. Item 1 is the confirmation of our minutes from the 17th of April 2023. There's a recommendation that they be received. Is there somebody to move that? Councillor Nicholson. Seconder, Councillor Oliver. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item 2 is adjourned debate. There is none. Item 3 is presentations and deputations. There are none. And item 4 is petitions, and there are none. Item 5 is questions with notice. 5.1, a question from Councillor Nicholson regarding Gather Round 2024 in Alexandrina. And that is the only question on notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Oliver. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to ask for an update, a verbal update for the Chamber regarding the repairs to the Mill Terrace footbridge at Middleton and also the Horseshoe Bay Jetty.
Yeah, through the chair. Middleton Mill Terrace Bridge. The tender process was wrapped up last week, and the tender's now been awarded to a preferred contractor. The contractor's already been on site with us this week to have a look, and will supply me with an imminent start date within the next 24 hours. We're looking at completing the project by September, touch wood, depending on weather, and this whole body of work will amount to around about 300k. So that's one bridge. The Horseshoe Bay Jetty, we've got 230k in next year's budget, hopefully, which will make good the repairs. We've been quoted for about 150k of the initial repairs for the structure, and there's another 100 or so k for other maintenance issues while they're on site. Divers have been under the water already to verify what's required. And once we get the budget signed off, we'll look to commence the project in early July and look to have it finished hopefully by September. To ensure the safety of the public, the structure will remain fenced off while the work's being completed.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. My question is in regard to the budget and also agenda items 7. We've been working through a very detailed and rigorous budget setting approach, and everyone has been fantastic and shown great restraint and cooperation during that process. Part of that consensus has been no new projects or major initiatives that will blow out our budget. In regard to agenda item 7, I just wonder, could you please advise the estimated cost of each of the motions included under agenda item 7? And how much, if anything, is included in the draft budget, either specifically or a general provision for each of those items? I'm happy for you to answer those as we go through each item. Or you can go through it up front, it's up to you.
Through the chair, I prefer it if the mover of the motion speaks to each item, and they can give an update of what they believe the costs are, and I can just verify from administration's point of view. So let's deal with them one at a time as the motions come up.
Any further questions? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just briefly, with regards to the overflow at the Strathalbyn Caravan Park, I just wanted to ask, is a development application required? And if there was one, what level of consultation, if any, there would be? And if council members would know about that? Thank you.
Through the chair, a development application has not yet been submitted. One would be required, and the level of consultation would be to adjoining neighbours. I'll just get Mr. Atkinson to confirm, actually. No. we would also need to give consent as the owner of the land.
Thanks. Through the chair, a development application would be required to be submitted, albeit that there are existing use rights for a caravan park on a portion of the land. Because it is expanding, that will trigger a development application. It's likely that it's not going to be a form of application that we can consider to be minor, and would likely generate interest, so it will need to be notified in accordance with the Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act. And as Nigel quite rightly points out, there's also the matter of landowner consent that would need to come back to the Chamber.
Any further questions? Councillor Coomans.
Thanks, Mayor Parkes. At our last information session, the CEO said that he no longer intended to include reasoning or an officer's report in terms of any motions that are moved, which means that all we get is the motion and nothing else. I did send him a heads up today saying that I was going to ask this question because it seemed to me that any resident who wants to know what it's all about either needs to be here or needs to listen to the tape, and that's a real challenge. So would a possible solution to this be, and one of the things he raised was that the elected member in the reasoning may not provide factual information, and there's no way of checking that without a proper report. And would a way of covering that be by actually putting some words in the reasoning as part of our procedures, that the words that are provided there are not necessarily those of factual information, or some sort of words to the effect like make clear that the statement and so forth is the proposer's only and not necessarily that of council. Some sort of wording that would disclose that we need, from my point of view, we need the reasoning. We need to know why the motion is there. And if coming along to a meeting like this and making a considered decision is just not the way to go. And I might have a supplementary question on that as well.
Through the chair, as CEO, I'm responsible for the agenda to make sure it is accurate. I'm also responsible to ensure that that is a correct reflection on council, what's printed in the agenda. I think that with the level of motions on notice that are coming in, I haven't got the capacity to check all the facts and do that. I also think that if there's a motion that you believe the community need more information on, then it should be in two phases. The first phase is to ask administration to do a report to bring back, and the second stage would be for council then to consider the report before making such a decision. My feeling is that if a motion cannot be explained in just the motion, then it really should be a report first. Or the motion should be structured to give enough information to the community. I know that there is some instances where reasonings is, of course, you can check that it's factual, but on other cases, they've been too long to actually determine, or they've been full of opinions, and I've made the decision, and it's been backed by council lawyers that the reasoning can be removed.
Yeah, look, I did have a look at the Local Government Act, and do you think maybe under the guiding principles, where it says that procedures should be transparent and informed decision making, procedures should encourage community participation, and procedures should give community and decision makers confidence in deliberations? Does that sort of mean what you're proposing would not be the best way of meeting those guidelines?
Through the chair, you've said it brilliantly, that you need to have informed decision making, and that informed decision making needs to be true and accurate. And I believe that if you need to do that informed decision making, then it should be accompanied by a report. So make your decisions, be informed. But I don't believe that the chamber should be making decisions based upon individual elected members' opinions or what they believe to be factual without having that check first. So if you require more information, ask for the report first, and that's the same with the motions up tonight. If you were not fully informed, then you should not be making those decisions, and you should be asking for a report first before being fully informed and proceeding to make that decision.
Okay, so final question is, your recommendation to all of this is that if there is a motion with notice in the agenda, that the best course of action is to actually defer it for proper information, for a report from administration before making an informed decision?
No, that's not my recommendation. What you need to do is consider each item. You'll have an item on the agenda which will propose a motion. The mover of the motion will then explain their reasonings behind. You have the ability to ask for more questions from me. I can confirm, or I can say I haven't got that information before me. And if you're not in a position where you believe you're fully informed to make the decision, then you probably should defer it. If you believe you're fully informed by the move of the motion and the answering to any questions by administration, then proceed to answer that, proceed to make that decision and vote upon it. I can't make those decisions before you. I can't make those decisions now before you listen to the debate and listen to what the mover of the motion has to say. Be informed.
Any further questions? If not, we'll move on to item 7, which is notices of motion. 7.1 is Councillor Sue Miller, the community transport options, budget provisions to address gaps in the North Ward. And there's a motion there, a motion there moved by Councillor Miller. Do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Worship. I've moved this motion for the following reasons. On the 20th of March, Council resolved CM 23086 to review as a priority Council's agreement with Hills Community Transport with a view to increasing support in the draft annual business plan for North Ward and Malang and Finnis. So that's a resolution of Council. The minutes of the 16th of January 2023, in response to a question asked by Councillor Maidment on transport options, advised that Council currently funds the South Coast communities to the tune of $75,000 and the North Ward communities to $14,000. I believe that this inequity needs to be addressed. The minutes for the 16th of January also had, in response to a question I asked on the Council's submission to the Select Committee for Public and Active Transport, had referred to a report to Council on the 18th of November 2019, Community Wellbeing and Future Directions. Since November 2019, Council has ceased Council's Home Assist program, and the needs of our community continue to grow, not decrease, and their needs are currently, in my view, not being met to an acceptable level. The Strathalbyn Township is served, but it's very, very challenging outside of Strathalbyn to receive transport support. Despite the proximity of the North Ward to metropolitan Adelaide, there are small towns in our council area that are severely disadvantaged in terms of transport services. They're not supported by public buses nor private services, and are in a community passenger network service gap as well. This is the townships of Ashbourne, Clayton Bay, Malang, Langhorne Creek, Finnis and Woodchester. Transport costs associated with accessing medical and health services can be very high because they don't have access in the region and community members have to travel to Adelaide. Our own submission to the Legislative Council Select Committee on Public and Active Transport on the 26th of August last year supported this gap and identified it. And there's a population of around 10,000 people in the North Ward that are potentially, at some point going to need support. So what I'm asking for in this motion is to, at the very least, match the funding that is provided to the southern communities in our council area. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Thornton, do you wish to speak? Is there any discussion? Councillor Oliver.
Again, I do like the intent of this motion, but given where we're at in our budget process and the restraint that we're showing, I wonder if this is not something that should be submitted now for the next year's budget as a budget submission or project bid.
Any further? Councillor Gardner.
While I recognise that there are a number of people in Strathalbyn, Malang, Clayton Bay, Finnis, Goolwa, Hindmarsh Island, Middleton and Port Elliot and possibly other areas of our Alexandrina Council who struggle financially and don't have the ability to drive to Adelaide in their own vehicle. The thought of providing any more financial pressure on the proposed budget for 23-24, frankly, is unthinkable. This chamber requested the CEO to present a budget that was balanced, and he has done that with an enormous amount of work, which has happened with his staff, the GMs, the managers, people within our council. And for us to mess around after we have spent a whole day talking and thinking about the budget in that workshop that we did, I cannot, with a clear conscience, do anything that will stop us from having a tiny amount of money that where we've actually balanced the budget. What annoys me intensely is that the state government has said, oh, we'll have 2,500 more houses in Goolwa. And if you think about the developments that are happening in Strath, but no thought, not even a whisper about how they would supply transport to those people who might need it. It just actually makes my blood boil because they blithely suggest that, or even maybe insist that we have all these extra houses in Goolwa, but provide no clear answer to the transport problem. It is an issue. It's a major issue. I really understand that. $75,000 will not actually provide much of help to the needy residents in the North Ward. And I'm really sorry about this, but I'm not going to vote for anything that which will affect the budget for 23-24.
Any further discussion? Councillor Maidment.
Yeah, excuse me. You've got to bear in mind the budget is not a fait accompli. It's a draft budget. It still can be massaged. It's got to go out for community consultation. Given that the staff have worked tirelessly on this and they've put a lot of effort into it, doesn't mean to say that's what's going to be delivered in its entirety. You can still play around with it at the last minute because we have to listen to what our constituents want. And I'm sure this motion has come from the locals. It's been talked about for years about this inequity, 75 against 14, with the distances that the North Ward have to travel and to get to where they have to go. So don't get hung up on no more additions to the budget. We can always trim the budget in other areas, and it's still not over yet.
Any further discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Thanks, Mayor Parkes. Look, I think there's general agreement that community transport is an issue right throughout Alexandrina. Certainly it has been in my particular area as well. We attempted to start a service with Willunga Bus. It's a volunteer group who run buses in Willunga, and they were quite happy to come down and take some of our mostly disadvantaged people it was, and they took them to Goolwa, so they took them to Strath and to Victor Harbour for shopping. And it seems to be that something that people want, even though they had to pay for it, they had to make a reasonable donation. And one of the other things we also looked at is a park and ride facility so that people can actually park in a central location, and Compass isn't a bad place for that, because people driving from Goolwa and Victor Harbour could park there, and then if we could provide a bus from there to the train service at Seaford, that seemed to be a no-brainer to me, but that's something that is going to cost a fair bit of money to do, and it's something we should look at. So community in general is an issue, but look, I think now's not the time. It's certainly something that we maybe should be looking at a report on in the next financial year, and see what sort of options there are, what sort of support there is, what sort of need there is from the community, what sort of funding there may well be from state and federal areas as well. And maybe we can put a good package together that provides advantage to all of our residents. So I can't support it at the moment, but in essence, the idea of further investigation is something that's worthwhile.
Any further? Councillor Scott.
Yes, I'm a little intrigued. We could have had something like this running a couple of years ago. We had our own bus, and the bus was sold, and I can never understand why we sold the bus. Other councils have volunteer drivers. They have the bus, and it could have done a Finnis, Clayton, Malang, Strath on a Thursday or something like that, and then return 4 hours later or something. It could have been used with volunteer drivers, and it disappeared into thin air. And I couldn't understand why it was being sold, because buses can last for up to 25 years legally. So I was a little intrigued, and now the horse is bolted, so here we are, and we've got nothing.
Any further? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I think it's really important that everybody in Alexandrina has access to, or that we're considering their access to community transport. I'm interested to understand the equity aspect a little more, and I have a question. I'm wondering if the comparison in the spend of 75,000 to the Scott scheme and 14,000 to a scheme in the North Ward, are you considering equity in terms of how much is being spent per ward or per head, per capita in those communities?
That can be answered in the summation. Prior to reply. Any further discussion? I would just like to comment and say, we talk about budget massage. I hope you massage it down, not up, because there's people out there doing it really, really tough, I'm telling you. There are more and more people now that the support groups supplying food packages have never seen before. People on 2 incomes that can't afford to buy food because they're getting smashed from every direction. We've just got to really do what those families are doing and tighten up. And there's 3 wards in this council, but this is Alexandrina, not the North Ward. I am very, very disappointed. After 8 years, I've tried to do everything I personally can to make this a cohesive Alexandrina council and work for everybody, not start segregating wards. And West Ward doesn't get a mention about what it should get. So I talk to ministers, Nigel and I go to Southern Hills, and we have done for all these years. Southern Hills have a public transport policy. We've worked really, really hard to hit the government really strongly about the lack of public transport and the need for it in this area. So I'm not going to go and tell a minister we need a bus service in Strath. I'm telling him I want a bus service for Alexandrina. And that includes Victor Harbour as well. They're all part of the area. Wish to have your right of reply?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, we did have a full day budget workshop. However, that's not a decision-making forum. The only way council members can influence budget decisions is through the chamber. The CEO's key performance indicator, yes, was to deliver a surplus budget and no greater than CPI, and he's done that. And I think Nigel and the executive and the administration has done an incredible job putting together the budget and the information provided to us. It's now up to us as to whether we wish to go with that or respond to our community's requests and test their willingness and capacity to pay. I acknowledge that we must. I'm not endeavouring to create a them, North Ward, South Ward. I'm just asking for acknowledgement that there is an inequity. There is a gap in, and I'm not talking about public transport in this particular motion. I'm talking about the home and community support networks and Hills Community Transport. I'm talking about the residents in the North Ward who we've acknowledged in our own submission to the state government that there are gaps there, and there have been for some time. We made a resolution on the 20th of March, and I'll read it out, that said, review as a priority Council's agreement with Hills Community Transport with a view to increasing support in the draft annual business plan and budget for Alexandrina residents under this arrangement who reside in the North Ward and the South Ward townships. I haven't mentioned the West Ward because they do receive support from South Coast or Southern Communities Transport Service. So, and I appreciate the advice regarding this. At the very least, I just think if we don't keep raising this and bringing this up, if at the very least we just advocate for it, then that's great. But I'm not sure why we can't provide some more support for those residents in the North Ward. Thank you, Your Worship.
That closes the debate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's lost. So 7.2 is a motion from Councillor Miller regarding hosting a gather-round football match at the Strathalbyn Oval. And there's the motion before you. Do you wish to speak to that one?
I'd like to declare a conflict of interest in this matter. I'm chairman of the Strathalbyn Oval Controlling Committee, and it's mentioned here, but I'll stay for the debate.
You wish to speak to it? You wish to move it?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. I did. My reasons are that the Strath Oval has hosted a pre-season game in the past. Investing in hosting a gather round in partnership with the state and AFL would see the Oval left with significant legacy infrastructure. Our proximity to Adelaide is often underrated, and I think any issues could be addressed. I won't expand on it. We need to be part of the gather round conversation and let the state government and AFL make the call. The Great Southern Football League president has said publicly he would provide a letter of support for Strathalbyn Oval if asked. And I read that in an article in which Mayor Parkes was also quoted. I did ask on the 19th of April, I raised this with Mayor Parkes and the CEO about Strathalbyn hosting a gather-round game, and that advice to me was that I needed to formalise that with a motion on notice. All I'm asking for is that we be part of the conversation. We have a facility that could host such a game. Thank you.
So just before we go, I'll just clarify. I've never said we should try and get a gather-round match at Strathalbyn. I'm very happy to try and get a gather-round match within Alexandrina. We've got 4 decent ovals. One we've just spent $10 million on. And yes, we did have a season opener at Strath, but it was not it wasn't a premiership points game. My advice is that we'd be very unlikely to get a premiership points game. I think what we could hope to get are some training sessions at some of our ovals. So is there a seconder for this? Councillor Thornton. So is there any further, Councillor Scott, you wish to speak to it?
I'd like to move an amendment, if I may, or alter the motion with the permission of the mover and the seconder, that where it says Strathalbyn, I'd like to see it in Alexandrina, because I was thinking, what about our other ovals? And Strath did have a match there a couple of years ago, and it would be nice to spread it around. And so, if possible, either put a number four, that, or else change where it says hold it at Strathalbyn Oval, that one be held in Alexandrina area. If
So,
providing that the mover and the seconder are happy with that.
Are the mover and the, well, Councillor Miller, you're the mover, are you prepared to have that change to it?
I'm prepared to accept a change to Alexandrina, to the Alexandrina region. I would like, noting the Strathalbyn Oval has previously hosted an AFL pre-season game, to remain. And I am happy to, where else we mention, to host a gather-round match at a Great Southern Football League oval, because that's what the president of the Great Southern Football League said. So I'm more than happy to, if that is what will get this over the line, to have us just as part of the conversation. And the rest, I think, can remain.
Yeah, what you should be doing is just taking, if you go through it, you take, you can note the Strath Oval's had it before, but after the 2026 at an oval within the Alexandrina Council area, you request the Great Southern Football League to have a match within the Alexandrina Council area, and we write to all of the oval controlling committees advising them that we're going to be seeking to have a round at one of our ovals. That makes it completely generic over all the ovals.
A point of order, Your Worship. This is the motion that I presented. What's being asked now of me is not a variation, it's an amendment. It's significant, it's not a simple variation. So I'm happy to let this stand on its own, and if it fails, someone else can move something.
Can I speak, please? Councillor Scott moved an amendment to the motion, and then he's asked for the mover and seconder to accept the amendment. So you're not prepared to accept it? That's fine. Good. Yes or no?
Are we talking about an amendment or a variation?
It's an amendment, so the amendment will take precedent over the motion.
Yeah, she doesn't have to give permission for that. Gives permission for a variation, but not for a motion, an amendment.
So, Councillor Scott, let's get it straight. You want to vary it or amend it? You did say amendment, and you want to vary it or amend it? Let's get it right.
I started off with an amendment. I thought variation might make it simpler, but if it needs to be a number 4 on it, then that other ovals within the Alexandrina Council be considered when applying for one of the matches. If you want to do it that way, if it can't be done the other way.
Let's just stop going around and around. Let's just get it, think about it, what you're saying, and get it right, what you want to say. So if you're going to move an amendment, it would be a moved amendment. If you want to seek a variation, that's a variation. So you have to make your mind up which one you're doing.
Well, as a point of order, a variation requires the permission of the mover and the seconder. An amendment doesn't.
It does, but you haven't told us what your variation is properly yet. Still trying to get to it.
Well, I thought we'd got through it all with yellow and that it had been typed up, but then the mover suggested that the thing had been changed so much that she wanted to go back to her original motion, and the other could be done later. So then, if that's the case, then we need to move to number 4, have a 4, that consideration be given to other ovals in the Alexandrina area when applying for one of a match in this round.
So I want to know, I don't want a preamble, I want one word or the other, an amendment or a variation. They are different. So I don't need to be told what they are. I want you to tell me what you want to do, please, or we'll be here all night.
I would have liked a variation, but I have no control over variation. I have control over an amendment.
Well, so what do you want to do?
I'm happy with a variation, but it requires the permission of the other two.
Councillor Miller, are you happy to accept it as a variation?
I'm happy to accept an additional paragraph that says, which is a variation, which I'm happy to accept, that we write to all other, that we consider all other ovals in Alexandrina Council that are suitable, if the second is happy with that.
So, Councillor Thornton, are you happy with that? Now that we've got it sort of typed, are you happy to accept that? Yep. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Oliver.
I'm just wondering, I'd love to see an AFL match sometime during our term of office, whether that's next year or when it works. But I just wonder, if we were successful and we got a pretty good offering, how would it cost us any money? And how much money would it cost? And do we have that in our draft budget? And therefore, if we don't have it in the draft budget, maybe we should do all the writing now, but ask for one over the next 3 years that the gather round's going to be held, perhaps when we can afford it. And again, with all due respect, and I love the motion and everything.
So all this is asking us at this stage to write to them. So if they came back to us and said they were going to do something on one of our ovals, they would tell us what they would expect from us, and we'd have to work out what it cost, and that would then come to council for a budget alteration.
And the CEO's estimate of what the likely cost would be to us?
You don't know, because you don't know whether you're going to get a match or a training session. Training session would be minimal cost, a match would be high cost.
Is it the case that the last match held at Strathalbyn cost council $100,000?
It did. It did cost us that sort of money. There's a lot involved in it, and there was a lot of cost borne by the AFL as well. And the Oval did benefit from that cost by getting new goalposts and to AFL standard at no charge. So there was benefits all round, but it did cost us.
And I'm sorry to ask another question. I think I would need to understand what the community benefit is, and is this an occasion where perhaps there should be a paper written so we understand what our cost and benefit is likely to be? I'm sure that paper wouldn't be a very big paper.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, once we get a response, letting us know what we're likely to get offered, if we're lucky enough to get something, then you could look at, then you'd know what the costs are likely to be and what sort of support you're going to get. There was about 8,000 people came to the season opener a couple of years ago, but one of these gather round matches requires a lot more infrastructure. But I think they bring that in, but we'd have to wait and find out. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree, Councillor Miller. I think it would be fabulous, and with other members of the chamber, I think it would be fabulous to have a gather round game or event here in Alexandrina. I'm just referring back to my question on notice where we are advised up here that the Office of Premier and Cabinet are putting together a framework and formal process for venue selection, which will include assessment criteria. So I'm just wondering about the impact of all of this work now when the process for venue selection and assessment criteria will be out soon. And I'm just wondering about whether it would be worth waiting for that before we write advocating for Alexandrina with a little bit more information, I suppose.
Won't hurt. It's only a letter, so it's no big deal, and it won't hurt to put our other councils are sticking their hand up, so it won't hurt us to put our name on the list. Councillor Maidment.
Yeah, it says here to write to the various controlling committees and clubs. It would be very embarrassing if it came back that any of those clubs refused the offer. So wouldn't it be prudent to go out to those groups that run these ovals and determine whether in fact they're interested? Just putting it out there, because if you write these other letters along the lines to the that we're quite happy to have one, and then you're going to get pushback from the relevant groups, then we'd have, it would look very embarrassing.
We can do that. We can just seek their expression if they're interested in having their name put up before we send the letter. It's no problem. I can't see anybody saying no. We're mad. Any further discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Yeah, just a question. I thought we were going down the path of making all of the ovals available in Alexandrina, and when you look at number 1, it says at Strathalbyn Oval. Number 2 talks about the Strathalbyn Oval, and so does 3, and it's only 4 that raises the other ovals. I thought we were going to make it generic and make it all Alexandrina ovals. So we actually haven't put on paper what we were talking about before. Is that right? That's my question.
Through the chair, the way I read the motion now is 1, 2 and 3 covers Strathalbyn Oval, but number 4 then says let's consider other ovals and do the same type of thing. So I will talk to the other ovals, and then if they're interested, then I'll turn around and do steps 1, 2 and 3. I'll write to the Premier. I will then request from the Great Southern League a letter of support, and then I'll write to that oval and letting them know that council's made that decision. So I'll just repeat steps 1, 2 and 3 for all the other ovals as well. So I'll treat them all the same.
1, 2 and 3 does not.
1, 2 and 3 specifically state Strathalbyn Oval, but if I'm considering other ovals and processing it as above, it just means that for each of the ovals, I'll then substitute that oval for the 3 steps. So if I go to Port Elliot, give them a call. Do you want to have a game? If they say yes, then I will do step 1. I'll write to the Premier and say Port Elliot Oval's interested. I'll then request from Great Southern Football League a letter of support for Port Elliot Oval, and then I will write to Port Elliot Oval advising of council's decision. So I'm just repeating those 3 steps for every oval that's interested.
Perhaps I'll enter the debate now. Look, I think the idea is brilliant. The last one certainly was very successful. I think Mount Barker were over the moon with the results of that, and certainly Norwood Oval, my old home ground, was also pretty happy about it all. But I think this one's a little bit unfair. I'd like to consider all of the ovals in the overall letter, and I also think that in answer to Councillor Nicholson's question on notice, that the Premier and Cabinet are actually putting together a framework at the moment. I would probably prefer just to wait for that to see what the criteria is and then make an application. So at this stage, I think I'll oppose this.
Any further discussion? Councillor Miller, do you wish to close the debate?
Thank you, Worship. I I'm sorry that this has become so convoluted and complicated. All I was trying to achieve was let's write and say we would love to host a game, and we have 2 ovals that we know of in our Alexandrina region, that's in Counter Bay, and Strathalbyn, that would cross the first hurdle, I guess, and make it easy. Anywhere else, any other oval, to the best of my knowledge, would require some considerable work and investment, and there'd be others way, way ahead of us in that regard. So I'm happy to leave this to the Chamber to decide what they want to do. All it was doing was writing a letter and saying, we'd like to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
That closes the discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. 7.3 is a confidential item, so we'll move that to the end of the meeting, if that's okay, and do it then. So, everybody, any objections to that from anybody? No, fine. So 7.4 is a motion from Councillor Nicholson regarding Repay SA and the Alexandrina Council Partnership Opportunity. It's moved by Councillor Nicholson. Do you wish to move it and speak to it?
Thank you, Your Worship. Community service in South Australia is known as Repay SA. It provides an opportunity for offenders to make a positive contribution back to the community. Projects include things like removing graffiti, cleaning up transport interchanges, tidying up along roads and other things. Repay SA rely on the involvement of organisations and individuals to help with the success of the community service scheme, and they're always interested in new work and placement opportunities for offenders. I recently had a phone call from a resident of Goolwa who noted that we have volunteer groups picking up rubbish on the side of the road, particularly in front of the dump in between Goolwa and Middleton. There's a lot of rubbish on the side of the road. He noted that we have volunteer groups and wondered why council staff aren't stopping and picking up the rubbish when they drive past. And we had a discussion about resourcing, and I saw a Repay SA van on my way to Adelaide with a group of workers picking up rubbish, and I thought this could be a real opportunity for Alexandrina to partner with Repay SA in a mutually beneficial scheme. So I'm asking for your support for the administration to write to Repay SA and bring a report back to us about what it would involve and whether or not it might be beneficial for Alexandrina. Thank you.
So, got a second at Councillor Kermans.
Yeah, look, I certainly support this. Quite often driving down the Southern Expressway, the Repay SA have got groups of workers picking up rubbish. I think they almost enjoy doing it, and it's something worthwhile for the community, so I certainly support this.
Any further discussion? Councillor Scott.
We used to have them here. Does it go by contract, or once you have an arrangement? I thought we'd be on the loop all the time, but we've used them at the cemetery and in other areas. Thank you.
Well, all we're going to do is write to them and find out about it. We're going to write to them and find out about it. That's the idea of the motion. So, is any further discussion?
I just want to clarify, this is only to write and then produce a report of what the understanding is.
And a report back to council. Yep. Any further? So, do you wish to speak again? No. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 7.5 is a motion from Councillor Maidment regarding the remediation of land at Swamp Road, Strathalbyn. Do you wish to move it and speak to it?
I'll move it and I'll speak to it right now. So I'm aware that the wastewater 30-year master plan has been under development for some time. I've been playing backroom ping pong with the staff on this, and it's nearly finalised. It's also referenced in the CWMS long-term financial plan. I'm particularly interested in the decommissioned lagoons at Strathalbyn and the timeline for their rehabilitation. It'd be useful for the community of Strathalbyn districts if there was some clarity around council's intentions for rehabilitation going forward. I know that CWMS have an obligation to rehabilitate the land and revert it back to what it formerly was. There's no mention of this work in the Asset Management Plan 22 to 31, and as these lagoons are no longer required, it's past the time that council should direct its attention to the task. Prior to their existence, this area was known as the swamp and for most part of the year contained water and attracted considerable numbers of birds and other creatures. This area lends itself to the creation of a wetlands on the edge of Strath and in future could be used for stormwater harvesting. There's also an opportunity to enlist the help and resources of the Strathalbyn Field Naturalists, Goolwa to Wellington Local Action Planning Association, local service groups, individuals. It's just a roadmap to look at the rehabilitation of this particular land. It would come out of the CWMS budget, and it's only a small amount, and it would then, we could look for future state or federal grant funding, as I said in the motion, and these groups could actually do the work for us in a lot of ways. So it's only a small amount, and like I said, from the CWMS budget.
So is there a seconder for that? Councillor Miller. Any discussion? Councillor's got a question? You can ask a question.
We don't have anyone from the CWMS here, but have they the capacity to provide $5,000 this coming year, or not?
Through the chair, there's a lot of work that's already gone into having a look at these swamp, and we are actually still using that as an overflow. We're not ready to remediate it yet. There is some studies that have already been done. I think that this will progress it, and I'm sure that we could do that with the $5,000. So to answer your question, adding another $5,000 is achievable. Was that your question? Do you want to ask it again? No, got it.
Any further? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I second this motion because I think it's, it's supported in our A2040 Livable Green Connected plan under environmental innovation. If we had this document, we could seek funding for various grant programs. The Strathalbyn Field Naturalists could refer to it. The Goolwa to Wellington Local Action Plan Group could refer to it. Local service groups and individuals and I support everything that Councillor Maidment said. We'd be enabling our community just by preparing this document alone as a reference point. Thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. I just wondered, is that an internal cost? So we actually have someone employed who does this already that will just be simply using some of their time? And also my second part of this question is, does this in its current form represent a public health and safety risk?
Through the chair, it wouldn't have a public health and safety risk at the moment. I think I will probably process this in two stages, in that we'll put the $5,000 provision into the budget, but I think I'll also bring back a report first just to say where we're at the moment, and then talk about next stages. And if more than $5,000 is needed, then I will inform you about that at that stage. But yeah, I think first step is just to give background and let you know exactly where we're at.
So we wouldn't be committing that $5,000 until the report comes back?
No, through the chair, I'll put the $5,000 into the budget because this is asking me to put a provision in there, but it's provision only. I won't go ahead and spend that $5,000 until council's fully informed.
Any discussion? Further discussion? Councillor Gardner.
The CEO said, I think, we're not actually ready to do this yet. And I think it is inappropriate for us to move any provision of $5,000 when we haven't actually, when it seems like it is not, council staff is not ready to do it yet.
Through the chair, just to clarify, we're not ready to decommission it, but we are ready to plan for the future when the time comes to decommission it. So this is just getting ahead of the game, but it doesn't mean that we're going to get a plan and turn around and remediate it the next year. So I think what the mover is asking for, and he can again do it in the sum up, just planning for the future, for when that time comes.
Any further discussion? You wish to close the debate?
Yeah, thank you to the CEO for that clarification. That's all it is. It's a roadmap to remediation. It hasn't been used for I think about 15 years now, but and recently, I think it was last year, the year before, the effluent ponds were expanded at Strath, so it's just at the moment sitting there as a backup. Should something fail, well, we haven't heard about these failures or possibility of the risk to the community, and I'd like to see that at some stage. But as we've heard, as I've said, the 30-year wastewater management plan that we are yet to view, and I'd like to see this decommissioning and rehabilitation in that plan, and also the fact that we can piggyback on that and get local groups to do most of the work for us, providing we can get some grant funding.
So close the discussion. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? So in favour, against? That is carried. 7.6 is a motion from Councillor Lewis regarding public support for the voice. Councillor Nicholson, sorry, regarding public support for the voice. Did you wish to?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to withdraw this motion for tonight, and I plan to bring it back at the September meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. So 7.7 is a motion from Councillor Miller regarding the draft 2023-24 annual business plan and budget considerations and a budget allocation for community sport and recreation in the North Ward, Strathalbyn and District Basketball Association. And there's a motion. Councillor Miller, do you wish to move that and speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So the reasons for me putting this forward is, and I'm supporting this with questions. I've asked a question on notice in the 16th of January, and on the 20th of February the answer was provided to that. So this isn't something new that I'm raising apart from the amounts. So Council hasn't contributed any significant funding to the shared use single court 50-year-old plus gymnasium in Strathalbyn since Council ceased being a party to the joint use agreement in 2011, as advised in responses to my question on notice 20th of February 2023. The single court gymnasium is on Department of Education land and directly funded from the school's budget as well as the Strathalbyn Basketball Association. This motion seeks just some acknowledgement that the community is doing the bulk of the heavy lifting around this court maintenance and fundraising and the development of sport and recreation in Strathalbyn. And it provides for interim support, which is very minor, until the Recreation and Sports Strategy and Facilities Development Plan, that is only in the draft budget, hasn't actually been endorsed or an action plan developed. And you know, these are very resourceful, proactive and diverse community-based clubs, and I believe that it's more than reasonable just to ask for $2,500 to seal the floor annually and $3,600 to support this year in maintaining the building. So that's the reason. And I'm happy if you want to deal with 1 and 2 separately, but I think it's just, I'm happy for the Chamber to debate it. Thank you.
So is there a seconder? Councillor Thornton. Any discussion? Councillor Gardner.
Question, Your Worship. Can't this go through the community grants program rather than through putting this into our budget?
Through the chair, I'd need to check on that exact criteria, given that it's a Department of Education building. It's not really but it's also a community group that uses it. They're also wanting a scoreboard, so there is certain elements to it. There's also restrictions on how much we give through those processes as well. For example, $10,000 contribution to scoreboard is a bit beyond a community grant.
Any further discussion, Councillor Coomans?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Parks. Yeah, I guess I have a bit of an issue with this one. I looked at the community donations, and in the North Ward, it's almost $10,000 has been spent, and pro rata, there's about 12,500 available per ward. So there is some money available in there for the North Ward. However, at 8.2, Langhorne Creek Football Club are asking for $2,000. So that, in effect, would take them to very much the a third of the pot. But I guess what I'd prefer to see is something like this is a formal application from the entity, providing reasons and the purpose, and followed by some investigative report from staff. What we really see on this motion is sort of decision making on the run. So I think this one really ought to go for some further analysis, and maybe the ward might want to decide whether Langhorne Creek Football Club or this is whether they want to spend the remainder of the community grant money.
Any further discussion? Councillor Oliver.
Again, I'm sorry to keep repeating, and this is the last time I mention it, but I have to defend the budget and ask that this be considered as a project bid for next year. And I'm sorry, I won't be able to vote for this or the other ones in agenda item 7. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Miller, do you want to sum it up? I just clarify, with the community donations, and there are 3 allocations per ward, but just remember, that's an indication of how much per ward. It doesn't mean once you get to 1/3 in a ward, you can't get any more money. We've done this before where there was a significant project in Port Elliot that was of benefit to surrounding areas as well, where it was going to use up all their remaining money some years ago, but we took money out of, in those days we had 5 wards, took money out of other wards to be able to supply that money. So it's a good guideline, but if something really good comes up and there's plenty of money left in one spot, then we should still support it. So, Councillor Miller? Sorry? Yeah.
Because I was looking at the community donation expenditure, south have used 13.3, so they're a little bit over a third. The west is about 7,000, but I know of a couple of groups who are very interested in making some sort of application to take up some of that money. So their application isn't in the system now, but it is coming, and that's going to probably absorb all of the monies available. But there's still some money available in the north, if we sort of take it as a thought of about a third each. That's Langhorne Creek or this project.
Well, it would have to go through we haven't got an application from the people. So the other one we're talking about further down the track, Langhorne Creek, we've got an application from the committee. So Councillor Miller, do you wish to close it?
Thank you, Worship. I'm a little bit confused because I didn't think we were talking about community donations program. I think this should be considered on its own merits, not in relation to what the Langhorne Creek Football Club's doing. This is asking for $2,500 to support basketball in the North Ward. There is very little recreation and sport demand on council from the community in Strathalbyn. So I really don't have too much more to say. I'm not sure why we're now talking about the community grants program when I'm talking about the draft annual business plan and budget. I accept, and I'll go with whatever the chamber decides, but if the only way we can influence the draft annual business plan and budget is through the chamber, and that's what I'm doing and that's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Just for clarification, if I look at it and read it and add it up, it's 16,100 we're talking about, not 2,500, because there are 3 amounts of money involved. So I'll put the motion to you. All those in favour? Against? That is lost. 7.8 is a motion from Councillor Miller regarding the draft 2023-24 annual business plan and budget considerations. It's a budget allocation for community sport recreation in the North Ward for the Strathalbyn Strikers Club. There's a move by Councillor Miller. Do you wish to move it and speak to it?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Your Worship. The Strathalbyn Strikers Football Club gave a deputation to council a couple of council meetings ago. Again, there's very little recreation sport support for the Strathalbyn and surrounds community. I'm just asking for $1,500 for their Portaloo pump out costs every year. Probably didn't even need to put it through the chamber, but and given the decision that was made on the last item that I had, I'd actually be quite happy to separate this out and deal with A on its own if putting support for their ground leasing costs will put at risk them getting anything. I'm happy to deal with them separately, but I think all this does is highlight that we need a recreation and sport strategy and facilities development plan as a priority. I'm not sure how else we can support these sporting and recreation groups in our community, not just in the North Ward. Thank you.
So is there a seconder? Councillor Thornton. Any further discussion on that? Councillor Cummins, yeah.
Question. Councillor Miller is saying that she's prepared to separate them A, B and C, but the motion is for all three.
That's right. It's moved for all three. So is there any further discussion? You want to sum it up?
Thank you. The soccer club is experiencing rapid growth and it's constrained by its current land use challenges in terms of club rooms and amenities. They pay approximately $16,000 to $17,000 per annum on ground hire. Council hasn't contributed any significant funding or in-kind support to the club beyond planning and development advice. The club has a small tin shed as a club room, no toilets or change rooms. They use temporary portaloos. These community volunteers do so much for our community in terms of fundraising and facilities maintenance and development of sport and recreation in Strathalbyn. This motion provides for interim support until the recreation and sport strategy and facilities development plan is considered. And I really can't add anything else to that. Thank you, Your Worship.
I'll close the discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is lost. 7.9 is a motion from Councillor Miller regarding the draft 2023-24 annual business plan and budget considerations regarding Lot 10 Langhorne Creek Road, Strathalbyn, Stage 1 and Stage 2, Utilities, Infrastructure and Stakeholders Business Case. So, motion there, moved by you just to speak to it.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I'm sure everybody thinks I'm just continually banging on about this, and I am. In the last as a member of the public, this time around last year, I spoke for 12 minutes during the public consultation on this very topic. The $780,000 capital project Stage 2 delivery of utilities infrastructure at Lot 10 is in the current adopted 2022 long-term financial plan for the financial year 2023-24. However, the draft budget presented to council members in a workshop on the 24th of April proposes to push back this $780,000 to the financial year 2024-25 in the draft long-term financial plan. That will be an agenda item for the 19th of May Audit and Risk Committee meeting and the 22nd of May Special Council meeting. That means Stage 2 is proposed not to be in the draft 2023-24 annual business plan and budget and long-term financial plan that will go out for consultation. I believe there's clear air now. The council and steering group members are out of the shadow of the Harness Racing Club, and that was a council resolution, CM 23076. In addition to do nothing option, where we receive lease income, there are potentially many relatively low-cost, community-led and funded interim opportunities at Lot 10 if there are services to the site. I am very concerned without visibility in the draft annual business plan, budget and long-term financial plan, the user groups, and we have a project steering group who are being or may seek grant funding won't have anything to point to that Council remains committed to progressing this site. And as I said, I advocated for this as a member of the public last year during public consultation and the community, and I were very grateful Council retained this in response to community feedback. We've had a deputation from the Strathalbyn Strikers Club about Lot 10. We've had a deputation from the camp draft people. This project was in the current budget and the long-term financial plan, and it didn't get priority. If it's not in the budget next year, it has even less chance of remaining visible from a public perception and perspective and perception. There'll be no formal opportunity to gauge public sentiment. So much work has already been done regarding what could happen without the Harness Racing Club there, with a minimal investment from Council. The utilities work will activate the site. And it's my understanding that given the $780,000 is a capital project to deliver the utilities infrastructure for the site, there's little impact on the 23-24 budget because it's a capital purchase. The project steering group last met on the 9th of February, and there's been no formal communication to the group from Council since that meeting. So my point, I guess, is there's a very long history at this site. It's not a new initiative. It finally had some momentum, and now we are, it's a casualty of a budget workshop, and I raised it in the budget workshop, and this is the only way that I can see that I can get some kind of visibility on this initiative. And it was already in the budget and it's been taken out. So I guess if this gets, my understanding is this was the only capital project that was the casualty. I hope maybe that's not correct, but that was my understanding. So I'll be very disappointed if this gets removed. And I hope someone seconds keeping this in there for the public to be, again, consulted on.
So is there a seconder? Councillor Thornton. Is there any discussion? Councillor Scott.
Where are we up to with the steering committee, the working group, in relation to the development of this since the termination with the Harness Racing Club?
Through the chair, there's a meeting tomorrow night with the steering group committee, so they're getting together again to discuss it.
Any further discussion? You got another? I can't. Yeah, but can you? Sorry. Thank you.
Then where have they been up to since, or haven't they had any consideration since, or had an alternative plan since the termination of the interest of the Harness Racing Club? I'm just trying to gauge where we're up to. If there's nothing happening, is it, can we gain a year and not have to spend that money, and by the time they've sorted out exactly what they want to do, we could perhaps do it in a year's time?
Through the chair, we haven't got the group together. The Harness Racing Club request to buy a piece of land was made, so that will be done tomorrow night. In regards to the 100,000, which was in this current financial year, to go ahead and do scoping and to have a look at a business case for Lot 10, we have been progressing that. We've also put $100,000 into next financial year as a carried forward item to make sure that that scoping and that business case still occurs. In regards to item 2 of the 780,000, it was the feeling of administration that we would not be in a position to finalise that scoping document, have a plan in place to determine exactly where that infrastructure goes in the next financial year, and that's why we pushed it out, so that we didn't rush it through, so that the documents were tabled. We knew exactly how much it cost. I mean, the 780,000 was actually put into the budget, I think, about 4 years ago when it was scoped out what infrastructure may cost. So what the scoping document would occur out of the 100,000 was to let us know exactly what it is. That then gives us an opportunity next financial year to then put in the budget for the year after that, the exact amount that's going to occur, and to know exactly where the infrastructure is going to happen.
Any further discussion? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify, so am I correct in understanding that points 1A, 1B, and 3 are essentially already happening?
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to support those because I think they make sense. But number 2, I think, is what I'm not sure about. So I wonder if we need to separate these out because I'm not sure how I'll be able to vote for all 3 at the same time.
You can't separate it now. It's all part of the motion. So is there any further discussion? Councillor Coomans?
Look, sorry, I'm just not 100% clear. You mentioned $100,000 is in this year's budget to do some scoping, and you're saying the remainder of that 100 will go into next year to continue that? It's not an extra 100,000, it's what's left of it. Okay, so there's no change in the budget in terms of that. What would be new is $780,000 in next year's budget. That's not budgeted for at this stage.
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
Any further? Councillor Maidment.
Yes, a lot of work has gone into this prior to this chamber forming back in 2019, early 2019-20, where $100,000 was set aside in this year's budget so that we could scope the utilities costs. And at that time, 180 was the amount. So we're looking at 4 years, almost 4 years on. It's going to be significantly higher than the $780,000. So that's why I struggle with the second component of this motion. The 100,000 was to make sure that we could afford a future establishment costs of this area, scoping the project, and now it's stakeholders' business case, where I would have thought that the stakeholders would have done their own business cases, but we're going to facilitate that by this motion. If 2 was out, I'd be happy to support that, and thank you.
Any further discussion? No. So, regardless, 1's in. So it's in the budget. It's already part of the budget. So the problem I have with this is I still get 2 stories from out on the street about who wants to go on this land and be part of it and who doesn't. And I've unfortunately not had the chance to sit down individually, which is what the motion that was lost was intended to do, was enable us to talk to each group and find out their interest on where they stood financially and what they could contribute. Also, I agree with administration. We can't go and spend whatever it is, whether it's 780, 800,000, whatever it is, putting infrastructure in when we don't know where it's going. We don't know where it's going to go yet because we don't know where all the components of the plan are and where the development is. So, and again, our long-term business plan, and our budget is a moving document. We always end up at some stage moving things out and pulling things in. It moves all the time. And it comes to council to be changed regularly as we go through the years. So, Councillor Miller, do you wish to close the debate?
Thank you. All the stakeholders form the project steering group that was established nearly 2 years ago. It has a terms of reference. It developed a master plan. We know exactly what everybody wants out there. We know what it looked like without the harness racing club there. And when it was starting to progress, they came back in and then they went back out again. We have a master plan for that site that came to this chamber, and I sat in the public gallery and looked and watched as that was debated. I really don't understand why we don't know what wants to happen out at Lot 10 or who's interested in it. And I'm just going to... I really don't know what to say. I can't... There's a steering group that has not been consulted with since the 9th of February, and now they are having a meeting tomorrow, and I hope that everybody can come. I'm at a loss to how to keep progressing this on behalf of the community. It's been on council's agenda for so long, and now we finally can move forward, and we're going to take it out of the budget and push it back a year. There are plenty of other things in our draft annual business plan and budget that are new or have come in since this has been going on, and I can't really add anything else. I'll leave it to the chamber to decide. Thank you.
So that closes the discussions. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is lost. The 7.10 is a motion from Councillor Miller regarding the draft 2023-24 annual business plan and budget considerations regarding the Goolwa Oval Recreational Precinct, and moved by Councillor Miller. Do you wish to move it and speak to it?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I do wish to move it, and I wish to understand really more about what is happening at the Goolwa Oval Recreation Precinct. And I don't quite know what is stage 3 elements, and if there are any of those in the draft annual business plan, because I think perhaps they've already been covered off in stage 2. So I am moving this, but I would like it clarified what is stage 2 and what's stage 3, and if there is stage 3 elements in the draft annual business plan. Thank you.
Through the chair, stage 2 is what was adopted by council to do the netball courts, tennis courts, or combined courts, some of the moving of the buildings and the work that's currently going on at the moment. Stage 3 is not in the budget at the moment, and stage 3 is more about car parking, which is just out the back of here. So none of the stage 3 is in there at the moment.
So is there a seconder for this? Councillor Thornton? Any further discussion? Councillor Coomans?
Look, I'm sorry, Mayor Parks and members. It's just questions keep coming to me on these things, and I'm wondering about. And I'm not making light of any of this because it's all serious stuff, with all due respects. But when I look at number 1, it says variations greater than 5,000. What are your expectations, through you, Mayor, to the CEO? What are your expectations in terms of the budget items for stage 2? Is there some expectation it'll be well within, or is it going to be near or over? Is it something that we need to look at now or not?
Through the chair, stage 2 is a multi-million-dollar project which has been adopted at a higher level. So if the multi-million-dollar project goes over by $5,000, I will be bringing it to a council's attention to say that the budget adopted has now been exceeded. Can I have some more funds before I continue on?
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Miller? Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think considering it's a very big project, and I would only assume there is some contingency budget built in, I think this is information that would be reasonable for the chamber to consider, and I can't see why I wouldn't support this motion. Thank you.
Any further discussion? So I'll put Councillor Miller. Do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is where we don't have background or reasons in the agenda. We'll just take a moment to explain why I've asked for this. The Goolwa Oval Recreation Precinct has not generated any revenue for council since it opened in February 2022. And that's a public document that's on our own website. The responses to my 17th of April 2023 questions with notice, 5.2, Goolwa Oval Recreation Precinct Master Plan Prudential Report in particular, but not limited to. In the Prudential Report that was prepared for Goolwa Oval Recreation Precinct, 2.2.3, we recommend the administration provide elected members with an assessment of council's financial capacity to undertake the project should the construction cost be greater than the estimated $4.5 million. Consideration as to whether additional borrowings will impact council's ability to undertake other desired projects and or achieve its target financial indicators in the financial year 23 annual business plan and long-term financial plan should be considered as part of the assessment. and the nature of the project, the potential inherent high financial risks which elected members and the administration should be aware of, as summarised, and that was in the response to my question, so I won't repeat them, but they're on a public agenda. So that's why I'm asking for anything greater than 5,000 to the budget for stage 2 to come to council. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
It closed Councillor Oliver closed the debate. That right of reply. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. I just will say that the Goolwa Ovals never contributed any income to council ever. Same as all the other ovals that are around the area. It used to get $5,000 a year or $4,000 a year in the old days, and they all get that, but none of them pay us anything but a peppercorn. 7.11 is Councillor Miller, draft 2023-24 annual business plan and budget considerations. Council meetings in alternate locations to Goolwa. You wish to move it and speak to it?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I do, noting that there is actually an agenda item on the later in the meeting, so I didn't know that there was a report coming to council. So yes, I am happy to actually withdraw this and deal with it at later in the agenda. I think that might be the best way to go about it. Thank you.
Okay. So 7.12 is the draft 2023-24 annual business plan and budget considerations for a walking and cycling trail to connect Willyaroo and Strathalbyn. It's a scoping document. It's moved. Councillor Miller, do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Worship. This is very straightforward, very simple. It's just asking for a scoping document to be prepared to connect what is a very large part of Strathalbyn to Willyaroo to Strathalbyn. This was also the subject of a question where I asked a question, it got responded to, so there's plenty of background as to why I'm asking this question. It's not something that has come out of the blue. I have tried to be considerate and ask questions and then move a motion so that there is some kind of trail as to how I've arrived at this point. I'm not launching them unsuspectingly, so thank you.
So do we have a seconder for this one? Councillor Thornton? Any discussion? Councillor Maidment.
Just a question. I don't know who can answer this, but I did notice that there is some road widening taking place from Willyaroo through the cutting by the cemetery to Strathalbyn. Is this what is the intention of the mover of the motion, or is this a separate trail? Because that would facilitate definitely cycling and walking along the side of the road.
Andy, are you aware of what's happening there? No. So we'd have to look into it and find out what they're doing, what their intention is. So is there any further discussion or questions? Not, did you wish to speak to it again and close it? No. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is lost. Go to item 8, which is administration reports. 8.1 is the distribution of funds to non-council owned ovals and halls. There's a list of quite a few halls on that there that advising that we should support them. Is there a mover for that? I think Councillor Miller and Councillor Scott seconding it. Any discussion?
Thank you, Worship. I would just like to say thank you so much. And I think the motion speaks for itself and has identified so many things in our community that are part of our fabric and well-being, and I was delighted with the response. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I'd just like to commend Councillor Miller for initiating this one at the beginning when we had that surplus money. And looking through all of the applications, they all seem pretty worthwhile to me. So I think this is fantastic. Thank you.
Any further discussion? No, so I'll put the recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.2 is the community donation program, and it's a request from the Langhorne Creek Football Club, and there's a recommendation there. Is there somebody to move that? Councillor Maidment. Seconder, Councillor Livingston. Is there any discussion? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. I strongly support. Strongly support this recommendation, and I think in our regional communities, a sporting club is so well placed to ask council for resources to run a program like this. I think it's fantastic, and I think the benefits would be far and wide. So very happy to support this.
Councillor Maidment. Should have spoke when you moved up to speak. Any further discussion? Councillor Scott.
I'd like to endorse what Councillor Nicholson has said. I think the events of recent months highlight the need for whatever we can do to assist with this sort of thing, and I think the sporting clubs are a great opportunity, particularly for the younger members of our community. So I certainly would be supporting it. If this is deemed to be beneficial to them, then it's a small amount for us to be supplying.
Any further discussion? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be supporting this motion. I think, as Councillor Scott said, football clubs can sometimes get a bad rap, and you think about the young men that are there, and we need to encourage these young men to have these conversations. I want to congratulate the football club for doing this and opening it up to the broader community. And the thing about this is you can't measure its success because you don't know how many lives you've saved or what support you've given. It's a bit hard to measure. So I hope that I commend this to council. Thank you.
Any further discussion? No, so before I'll just say I agree. I think it's really good that the Langhorne Creek Footy Club put this thing up and do this workshop. So it's a really, really good thing. So Councillor Maidment.
Yeah, I just think we should commend the Langhorne Creek Football Club for this initiative. They have been impacted in previous years along with other football clubs in the area. The fact that they're opening it up to the entire district is very commendable, and I think that it's a great initiative on their behalf, so I fully support it.
Close the discussion. We'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.3 is the request for a partial waiver of a land management agreement to permit a shed construction partially outside of the building envelope at number 11 Vanali Drive Port Elliot, certificate of title 5144/209. Councillor Livingston.
Thank you, Mayor Parkes. I have a general conflict of interest and I'll leave the chamber for this one.
Thank you. I have the recommendation there. Is there a mover for that? Moved, Councillor Maidment.
Speak to that?
Yep.
The critical word here is partial, and if you've had a look at the map, it's not a great impost on the land management agreement. The land management agreement, of course, was set for development ahead of the houses that are built along the main road there. So I can't see this as a problem, the fact that the shed will be built at the back of the property.
Councillor Coomans, you seconding it? Yeah.
Yes, I am, Mayor Parkes, and having a look at the actual site, there's no great imposition of what they propose to do in terms of the other properties adjacent, so I support it.
Any further discussion? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I just have a question. Have we had other requests like this? Because where it says others are outside their envelopes, I'm just wanting to ensure we're consistent. Like, I don't have any issue with it, but I just wonder if
Yeah, Matt will, Matt will answer it and explain it.
Thanks. Through the Chair, yes, we have received other formal requests for partial waivers within Vanali Drive for almost the same thing. There's probably one or two in there that might have erected them without approval, but for the most part, they've sought consent for a partial waiver.
So I'll speak to it now. So based on that information, I did wonder if there were some instances of seek forgiveness rather than approval, and so I don't think we can really refuse this, but I'm not condoning that kind of approach. But I think we just need to be consistent. And thank you.
Any further discussion? No, so I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Can we get Councillor Livingston back in, please? So 8.4 is an application for a memorial seat that has been withdrawn. 8.5 is a strategic land program, Coorong Quays, the CWMS land transfer, and there's a recommendation there with 5 dot points. Moved Councillor Gardner. Seconder, Councillor Oliver. Any discussion? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just checking. This is just a procedural last step in the procedure. Is that correct? What's happening here?
Any further discussion or questions? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.6 is the Port Elliot Surf Lifesaving Club draft ground lease to go to public consultation. There's a recommendation with 2 dot points. Is there a mover? Councillor Oliver. Seconder, Councillor Maidment. Any discussion? Councillor Scott.
Jim, we've been through this before with others. It seems extraordinary to me that there is a ground lease for when the building was only built 2 years ago or last year or something like that. It just seems extraordinary that we're doing it like this and that's not all set up beforehand.
We own the land, and when the ground lease runs out, you have to renew it.
Yeah, it just seemed a little unusual. I mean, we wouldn't want to reject it, would we?
Yeah, sorry. Is it true that the cutting is actually defined as a road? And is it something that we should look at in terms of rezoning it to community land?
I'll take that on notice and, get back to you on that one. Through the Chair.
Is there any further discussion? If not, I will put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Scott, are you against or in favour, or are you in favour or against it? That's carried unanimously. 8.7 is the RAA electric charging station to be installed in the Goolwa Council car park, and there's a recommendation there before you. Is there a mover for that? Move Councillor Oliver. Seconder, Councillor Livingston. Any discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Sorry, I do have a question. Yeah, there was a couple of options there, and it wasn't clear to me which which option you preferred, because the first one is in the sort of the inner car park that sometimes that place is normally full. So to take car parks away from the general parking is a bit of an issue, maybe.
Through the chair, they wanted to go with option B, which is further from the building, so that's what you're asking for.
Councillor Gardner.
A question, Your Worship. If we choose B, that's right up against the medical centre. Oh, sorry, it's right up against the medical centre. B, on the side of the medical centre.
No, through the chair, option B is, I'll get my bearings, but at the end of the building here, so this side.
Oh, so you're saying it's closer to the council building?
Option A was just outside the doors.
Oh, right,
in the
okay.
2 hour
I looked
zone.
at it wrongly then.
Yeah, option B hugs the building down the end.
My navigational skills and reading maps is good.
Just right down the very end of this building in the car park before it opens up. Yep. So this will be available to the general public?
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any further discussion or questions? Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, question. Who pays for the electricity that's used?
Through the chair, RAA will pay for that and they will reimburse us, but I understand that there's a charge for those people that are using the electricity as well.
Any further discussion or questions? No, so I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. 8.8 is the holding of council meetings away from the Goolwa Council Chamber, and there's a recommendation there that we receive this report. Is there a mover? Councillor Miller, are you moving it?
Yes, I'd like to move move that we receive the report, and I'd like to move here my motion from 7 point whatever it was. Thank you.
You'd like to include your motion?
Yes, please. Thank you.
In there. So,
I'm happy to speak to it if you'd like. Would you like me to speak?
We'll just give it
Yeah.
a second and we'll get it up. Yeah. I was just saying, can we suggest that rather than the 2,500 be made available, we make that 4,000 as per the report? So you happy with that? So, do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Worship. So I just wanted to say that our council area covers 182,000 hectares and our community is diverse demographically and geographically. The Electoral Commissioner, the X's voters roll for the 2022 November elections has 7,500 voters in the North Ward, 7,544 in the West and 7,431 in the South. For electors in the outlying and northern, eastern and westernmost areas of Alexandrina Council, travel distances and meeting start times may be discouraging council meeting attendance in Goolwa. The proposed locations potentially halve the travelling time for a significant number of residents in the event they're considering attending a council meeting. It may encourage greater interest in, engagement with, awareness of and understanding of the business of council. And I think we just need to give our community the opportunity to come and witness a council meeting. If this motion does get carried and we set dates, I'd just like consideration to be given to harvest, seeding and vintage time because we just need to be mindful of that. So I seek the support of the Chamber for this. Thank you.
Did you wish to second it, Councillor Gardner? Yeah. No. Is there a seconder? Councillor Nicholson. Speak to it.
I'm very supportive of Alexandrina exploring holding our meetings in other areas. I think it is very important that everybody is given as much opportunity as we can afford to give them to participate and come along to our meetings. I've read this report very carefully, and I agree with the recommendation that we should hire the equipment first and have a go at this. I support Councillor Miller's proposal that we make 4,000 available to try in the coming year. I think it would be great to try at least one. I'd like to see us try more, but very happy to go with one and see how we go. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Thank you. Look, I'm not in favour of this. I think we should be, if we're going to spend any money, what we should be spending on is making this system that we've got in this chamber a lot more efficient than what it is at the moment. I mean, what we have now is we seem to have problems with microphones switching on and off. We seem to have problems with speaking too close and distorting. We have problems in working from your point of view in terms of indicating who's spoken, who hasn't. There's all sorts of facilities that are available that makes this so much more user friendly and actually makes it work for us. And that's where I'd like to see the money spent, if we're going to spend any. We're going to do a road show with the budget, so that's an opportunity for the community to come and talk to us, and they will, hopefully. We also have the Village Conversations Plan. That's another opportunity, and they're all reasonably low cost. It's basically, you know, some tea and biscuits and coffee and biscuits, whatever, and inviting people to come along to those. And I think that's a reasonable way of meeting the community. I've been involved in the past where council have actually gone out to the community and set up in halls and what have you. I've never given them the big tick that it was a great, huge success in terms of turn up. So I would prefer that we focus in this place and make this place work better for everyone. So on that basis, I can't support this one.
Councillor Gardner.
Sorry. Could we please separate 1 and 2 and vote?
Not now, it's been moved. No, they've already moved it.
Oh, well, that's bad luck because I won't be voting for this motion.
Councillor Scott.
I see this as something that is nice to do when we perhaps can do it, and I don't think now is the time. It's only when there is a particularly strong debate over something or disagreement within the community that we have a gallery. And I support the comments of Councillor Coomans. It would be nice to be able to perhaps zoom into a meeting like this or whatever. There's all sorts of technology that we can do, as well as the problems that we've got with what we have. There's also, no one's mentioned it, there's a hidden cost with all this, because at the moment, if someone requests something, someone can dash upstairs or do something and get some of that stuff that's required. And but you can't necessarily do that I suspect you can't necessarily do that easy at Strathalbyn. But on top of that, the staff are based down here. They've all got to go up there for the meeting. So they've got some hidden costs. It's not just 4,000. There's some hidden costs with the staff, the inconvenience and everything else that is involved. So as I say, if there was money floating around and we had nothing better to do, then I would be supporting, but I'm afraid I can't support it now. Thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. I must agree with those comments. And also I'd like to note that this is the council chamber where the decisions are made, and we do have other processes to include the other locations. I'm also very mindful to the staff. I'm forever being astounded by the amount of above and beyond work that they're having to do, and I don't wish to make that any harder. Thank you.
Councillor Thornton.
I'd like to, if this doesn't go ahead, I'd wonder if we could look into doing information sessions or something elsewhere, and whether that would be more feasible.
Well, Nigel can look into it, things like that. Yep. Councillor Livingston.
I just wanted to note that I think, Councillor Miller, it is a great idea, and I understand your intention behind it. The issue that I have is with the budget and everything else being so tight, and I also agree with Councillor Miller about an information session if we can do that and it costs less, and that is an opportunity to represent the entire region rather than just in Goolwa.
Any further discussion? No. So before I give it to I don't have any problem with having meetings out in other towns. No problem at all. We've got to find a venue. It's big enough to hold us and the staff and the people that might want to come. I'd hate, for example, that we decide to have a council meeting at Mount Compass one night, and the item on the agenda is something like the Goolwa Wharf. So it's very problematic. But my biggest concern is it's not budgeted for. It could go in the following year maybe, but not this coming year. I personally can't support any additional expenditure that's not in the budget. But Councillor Miller, do you wish to close it, mate?
Thank you, Worship, and I completely respect the views of my colleagues. Just another point that I wanted to make. I did an analysis of the deputations that get made to council, and a lot of them are local or very nearby to Goolwa, and I think if we gave the opportunity to, just even if it's once a year, for others, we may get more interest and understanding of what happens with council. We are here to serve our community and be accessible and respond to the needs of our community. I know this council has done it in the past. Someone mentioned to me the other day that there was a few years back, which I don't know how long that means, there was a council meeting held at the Langhorne Creek Bowling Club, and it was really well attended. I'm not sure, Mayor Parks, if that was in your time or not. I do think there's interest out there, and I do think whilst it'd be nice to have things on the agenda that are relevant to the community wherever we hold it, it's not necessarily a critical element to consider, because at the end of the day we are here for the entire council area, and it's be really helpful to other parts of the community to have understanding of the other parts of the community. So I will respect the decision of the chamber. It's not a lot of money if you worked out what $4,000 is in the scheme of our budget. It's probably not even change on the barroom floor as an equivalent, and I'll leave it at that. But I think we should try it and see what kind of response we get, even if it's a one-off. I think our community deserves that.
That closes the discussion. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? It is lost. Go to 8.9, which is the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority draft budget for 23 to 24. And there's a recommendation there before you. Move, Councillor Oliver.
Can I move and can also make a small variation, please?
Yeah. What's that?
I'd like to make the recommendation, or subject to the outcomes of the review being undertaken by the CEO, noting that that's been planned for some time, and in the context that, yes, I do welcome the 1.9% increase only that's been limited, and I do welcome that many of the issues confronting the centre have been picked up in the business plan. However, we still have many issues that need to be dealt with and unknowns, such as the participation, the level of the charges, third-party revenue opportunities to improve the technology, decrease the costs, etc. So just a small variation to make sure that the outcomes of the CEO's review are going to be expected by FRACA when they're done.
Through the chair, we need to adopt a budget for FRACA going forward so they can start operating on July 1. I can see that you're wanting to approve the budget, but you're also wanting outcomes of the review being undertaken. But the way it's worded at the moment, it's saying that we're not going to approve it until that review is finished. That review is not going to be finished prior to 1st of July.
I'm happy for the budget to be approved. I guess what I'm asking is when you complete your review, that is to be expected by FRACA and that they will look at it and have another look at their business plan if there is anything material that you uncover that should be done. I'm happy for you to reword it appropriately.
So I might just reword it that the line that was there before and then just add a second line that council requests FRACA to review their 3-year business plan on completion of the review being undertaken by the CEOs. Okay, I'll just word that up and we'll get you to approve that one.
Councillor Oliver, are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you.
So do we have a seconder? Councillor Nicholson? Going to speak? Yep.
Very happy to second this and happy with that additional line in there as well. It's my understanding that the review was initiated by FRACA and very much welcome, and that FRACA greatly look forward to the outcomes of the review and very cognizant of what that means going forward for the operations of the Aquatic Centre. So I think that would have happened anyway, but it's very reasonable to have in there.
Any further discussion? Councillor Gardner?
Aquatic centres are not just providing a service. Aquatic centres, and particularly community ones, are actually essential services. So FRACA isn't just a swimming pool. It provides access to water safety education. It provides rehabilitation for those with sports injuries after surgery, those with medical issues like MS, arthritis, those requiring sensory hydrotherapy, because this centre has 3 pools, not just one. So it also helps those who simply want to maintain their fitness or improve it and even have fun. The FRACA provides an essential service to the very young, to the very oldest of our members of our community. Some of our elected members talked about mothballing it because it's too costly. Perhaps we as a council should mothball the Strathalbyn, because that costs money every year. Maybe we should mothball the library. Maybe we should actually mothball a few sealed roads and footpaths. They all cost money and it happens to rise every year. Maybe we should close the CWMS. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Maybe we should refuse to pay our share of Fleurieu, stop collecting residents' waste, recycling waste, green waste. Maybe we should stop our lighting in our streets. When we first came here 28 years ago, we didn't have lighting in the streets. I think it'd be a darn good idea to go back there. We could give perhaps everybody a torch. All of these things that I've talked about are essential services, and not one person wants them stopped or mothballed or question them. No one questions the amount of money that we spend on the libraries each year. No one questions the amount of money that we spend on sealing roads. No one even thinks about closing CWMS, and that the cost of CWMS goes up every year. It's all very well to just mouth off the top of our head about mothballing a particular essential service, but we all know that one of the incredibly important services is the fracker. So I'd like you to think very carefully about what you're going to do about the fracker.
Any further discussion? Councillor Miller.
I just have two questions before I can speak to this. Are we, in motion number 2, recommendation number 2, are we asking a review to be done on the review that they're currently doing? Is that what that is asking?
Through the chair, what that's asking for is once the review was done by the CEOs of the day-to-day operations of it, that we just ask FRACA to go back and just revisit the 3-year business plan, because there might be some adjustments that come from that review that's made.
I would have thought they'd do that anyway, but if that's clarified it. And if we don't, does this get put in our annual business plan, our draft annual business plan and budget, their document? Does that inform our draft annual business plan and budget?
Through the chair, there's an amount in the budget which we then put into our budget to pay for their 3-year business plan, yes. But we don't duplicate this document as such, but it's made publicly available.
Any further discussion or questions? No. Councillor Coomer.
Look, I commend Margaret, Councillor Gardner for her comments. I know she's pretty passionate about that pool, but, you know, when we had a presentation here on the information evening a little while ago, there were a lot of questions asked, and they should always look at making it more efficient. You know, we talked about the solar paneling and the blinds that could be utilised in a way that it offsets their power bills. And you know, little things like where do their clientele come from? You know, is it mostly Victor Harbour? Is it mostly Alexandrina? I know and the thing they don't do, and one of the things I would encourage them to do, is actually do a bit of a survey. I mean, there's a company down by the airport. Every time you walk in, they ask you your postcode. You know, from that you can immediately tell where people are coming from. They do know their members because the members provide the address. But, you know, the casual users, you don't know. So they must always try and work to make it even more efficient than what it probably is. In terms of mothballing, I don't think it should be. I think it's too late for that. But having said that, I would have thought when it was originally planned, maybe the location might have been a bit more towards the sea. Maybe it could have been a seawater pool rather than inland, because we've got all that coast that we could have used. But that's all too late. But, you know, if we can make them think about efficiencies, then I think that's a step in the right direction. But we're not going to mothball it.
Any further discussion or questions? Councillor Thornton.
I have a question. What happens if this is lost?
Through the chair, we'd need to bring back an alternative budget. We'd need to discuss with them why it is lost and what we're trying to look for. But we still need to run the pool, so we definitely need the reasons why it was lost.
Anything else? No. Councillor Miller.
So just one more question of clarification. In supporting this, when this is put to the vote, we're approving their budget, aren't we? That's what we're being asked to do. Just, yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Subject, but it's also subject to review. So I'll That's closed the discussion. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. So we go to 8.10, which is the Adelaide Hills Regional Waste Management Authority Draft Business Plan and Budget for 2023-2024, and there's a recommendation that we approve that. Moved, Councillor Gardner. Seconder, Councillor Scott. Any discussion? You've done a good job. Councillor Nicholson.
I just had a question. Do we have a somebody from Alexandrina Council who sits on this board?
Yes, we do. Any further discussion or questions on that? No, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.11 is the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority Draft Budget for 2023 to 2024, and there's a recommendation there before you. Moved, Councillor Livingston? No.
Sorry, I need to declare a material conflict of interest due to employment, and I'll leave the chamber.
Right, so we've got the recommendation there before you. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Gardner. Is there a seconder? Councillor Oliver. Any discussion? If not, I will put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Anybody against? It's carried unanimously. Councillor Livingston back here. So 8.12 is the appointment of community members and a chairperson for the Climate Emergency Environment Committee, and there's a recommendation there and the names of the recommended people. Is there a mover for that, Councillor?
I'm sorry, I have to declare a general conflict of interest with this one. I have a family member that is listed as being appointed, not classified as a relative under the legislation, so I'll stay in the chamber and vote. Thank you.
So is there a mover, Councillor Coomans? Seconder? Councillor Nicholson? Any discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. 8.13 is the Heritage Advisory Committee highlight reports, and there's a recommendation there. Moved, Councillor Maidment. Seconder, Councillor Gardner. Any discussion? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. I'm a little sad that the awards have been deferred for 12 months, even if we just understand the reasons why they were deferred. And I also think that that should have been a recommendation that came to council to do that deferral, or at least for the period of time. But I note the reasons why they did that. I just would like a little, perhaps in the future, if a decision like this is going to be made, this is an advisory body, so I'd like to see that it be a recommendation to council that the Heritage Awards be deferred for 6 months because of such and such. Apart from that, I think it's done, but maybe 12 months is a long time. I think we just need to understand a little bit more about why we didn't get nominations for these Heritage Awards, given where we live and the I don't think this suggests that there's not wonderful heritage work being done and undertaken in our community, and I certainly hope that I don't take this as it's not a reflection that there aren't worthy projects out there. It was perhaps just a timing issue, but yeah, 12 months I thought was a little bit long, but I'm happy to run with that for now. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Maidment.
Yes, it is disappointing that they had to be cancelled, the awards, and it is a timing issue. The Heritage Advisory Committee was disbanded prior to the election of this chamber. That was back in November. It didn't form until March, so expressions of interest went out to the community and we had people responding to that, wishing to be on that committee. So March to May was not enough time to get the interest of nominees leading up to our April meeting, and of course that's when the decision was made to cancel in April. Mind you, a lot of work had gone into sourcing the event that it was to be held at. The catering was organised, the guest speakers were all organised, and it's embarrassing to have all that organisation for when you only get 4 people nominating for 8 categories, and it wouldn't have been a very big event in any case, and so it was determined by the committee that basically a lot of them were new members, and that it's incumbent on them to go out and look for nominations for over the next 12-month period. So that's how that all happened, very quickly.
So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Anybody against? It's carried unanimously. I don't really want to guess what the outcome is, but it'd be good to see the hands. 8.14 is the South Australian Wooden Boat Festival Committee, their highlight report, and there's a recommendation there. Moved Councillor Oliver, seconded Councillor Livingston. Is there any discussion? I think it was a good event. Councillor Oliver.
Oh, thank you. Just briefly, obviously there were a lot of challenges, a lot of risks and a lot of unknowns just a few months ago with the flood and all the other issues. And I've got to say it was really looking quite uncertain for a while. I've got to commend the committee and also the external project management resource and the internal management resources from here for really getting a lot done in a short period. And I'd like to herald the festival as being a great success. Although there are only 122 boats, they did still manage to get good sponsorship and an amazing response from the public with 10 to 12,000 people attending, and we were blessed with beautiful weather, and it was just a great vibe. And going in that grand parade, it was one of the best things I've ever done in Goolwa. It's a pleasure for me to serve on this committee. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Livingston.
I just want to reiterate everything that Councillor Oliver said, and again express my gratitude to the committee. They did a wonderful job at very late notice to tie everything else in together for the festival, and it was a great festival.
Anything further? Not. Councillor.
I'd just quickly like to add that we went along with our family, and it certainly was a wonderful festival. Particularly appreciated everything that was there for the kids and adults alike. We met lots of other families there, and we're very proud to have that in our region and to be able to show people across Adelaide what we can do down here. I think it was fantastic. So congratulations to everyone involved.
Anything further? No, so I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.15 is the Alexandrina Sustainable Agriculture Roundtable Highlights Report. There's a recommendation that report for January 2023 and April 2023 be received. Moved Councillor Miller, seconded Councillor Maidment. Any discussion? That's a good report. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.16 is the declaration of prescribed officers, and there's quite a list of them, and there's a recommendation that be adopted. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Nicholson. Seconder? Councillor Scott. Any discussion? Not, we've put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. (8.17) is the Chief Executive Officer's report. There's a recommendation that the report is for April 2023. A recommendation that it be received. Moved Councillor Thornton. Seconded Councillor Oliver. Any discussion or questions? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just quickly, with the Goolwa Oval Recreation, the Goolwa Oval Management Structure, will that definitely be coming to June, do you think?
Through the chair, I am hoping so. I did leave my run a little bit late on this one, and there's some information that I wanted to obtain, which I was unable to do in those last couple of days. So I will begin working on that one later this week to make sure it's coming to June.
Just two other questions. Torella Street, when that letter goes out, could we please have a copy of it the day it goes out? Because sure enough, some of us will be contacted. So it'd be nice to know what communication's gone to the community. And Lot 10, thank you for setting the meeting for tomorrow. Do we know if there's RSVPs, given it was very short notice that that meeting date for the Lot 10 steering group was set?
Through the chair, I did check on that just before the meeting. I understand that there is 5 RSVPs and more expected tomorrow, so it's a good turnout.
Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously. Item 9 is council members' reports. 9.1 is presiding members' report, and there's recommendation that that report for April be received. Moved Councillor Oliver, seconded Councillor Livingston. Any questions or Councillor Livingston?
Sorry to do this to you, Councillor Scott. I just wanted to say congratulations for your 55 years of service. That's all right.
Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 9.2 is the council member activity report. We have a report from Councillor Gardner for March and April. Is there a mover for we receive that report? Councillor Miller. Seconder, Councillor Oliver. And is there any verbal updates people would like to include? Councillor Gardner.
Just on the reverse side, the next page of my report, it's April, not March.
Thank you. We'll fix that. Is there any other? Councillor Scott.
I just want to very quickly report that the Currency Creek Cemetery Advisory Group held their History Month tour behind the tombstones, as it's called, and it was very successful, very well received by the public, but more importantly, it just reflected how the various cogs in council can work so perfectly. We did a lot of work leading up to it, and the outside staff came and cleared away all the stuff we'd heaped up. We had inside staff helped us. Kath Messner did a great job helping us on the day, and we had our own volunteer committee, which had been working for some weeks beforehand and were there on the day as well. So it was just, it can happen, and it really happened there, and it was a great reflection of what a good thing that can happen when all the elements of council get together and work for a common purpose. So thank you. It was very successful.
Any further questions, Councillor Cooman?
Thank you, Mayor Parkes. I've got two items, if I could. Firstly, I'm seeking leave to make a personal explanation, if I could. Yep, thank you. Mayor Parkes, there was an article in a local newspaper that attributed a certain figure of speech I may have said during the April council meeting, and although I certainly did not recall making such a statement, as is not in my vocabulary, on further investigation it would appear in fact that I did say it. I'm not going to repeat the words, but it originated in the USA, and one meaning is that something is wrong, although it potentially contains an ethnic slur against the Afro-American population. I therefore sincerely apologise to Council and the community for the use of that figure of speech and will be more careful with my language in future. My second item is a much more pleasant one. As Deputy Mayor, on behalf of you, Mayor Parkes, I had the opportunity to assist the 19th celebration of the Ford 8 and 10 side valve national rally staging of the Goolwa Gala over the period of about Saturday the 29th of April to Monday the 8th of May, culminating in the dinner and a trophy awards at the Goolwa Hotel on the Sunday when the place was totally full of patrons. I opened the event on Saturday with a speech on your behalf and assisted with another few words and the prizes at the closure. Their program for the week saw them participating in the Wooden Boat Festival, providing a significant vehicle display in Goolwa, which by the way saw some 50 or 60 well-preserved and beautifully restored vehicles on display. They also toured most of the towns in Alexandrina over the week. I think their presence would have contributed substantial funds to Alexandrina economy. They are a joyful bunch of people, and the next event will be in 2 years and to be held in Perth, WA. In appreciation for the magnificent assistance from us and the council staff and the population in general, they've presented a trophy to council through me, and I think they would really like to see it on display in our cupboard. So I present to you, Mayor Parkes, in appreciation for all of our collective support. Pleasure.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I discovered on the weekend that all the councillors had received an invitation to the opening of SALT, the port at the Port Elliot Hotel, but no replies have been received. And I didn't think that I had received one, but I found it in my junk mail. So it would be appreciated, and I guess I need to declare that the person who actually sent the email was my daughter, Amanda Fairman. So she's saying, please, if you're going to come, will you reply? And it's specifically for the Western Ward, of course, because it's in your ward. So you might want to go.
The email came this morning. I got it. It came this morning at 8 a.m.
So she did another email, did she? Right. She's smarter than the average bear.
Yeah, I've had... Hang on. We're still in a council meeting. We're not having chit-chats. I've actually responded.
Yes.
Because it's in my diary. So.
Yes, she has your reply, Your Worship.
I'm not in
It
trouble.
was the councillors who hadn't.
Oh, right. I didn't want to think we'd done.
And the other thing, Your Worship, is that Amy McKenzie from the Goolwa Secondary School sent an email to me and Councillor Nicholson regarding Operation Flinders and requesting that councillors might like to think about donating because the college is sending students to a Flinders operation, or Operation Flinders, I think it's called. I did send you all an email, and I'm hoping that you'll reply to Amy.
Any further discussions? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Worship. Just quickly, I attended the Mayor's reception for the SA Wooden Boat Festival, and it was an amazingly successful event, and I'm very glad that I did, because I spoke to lots of people who gave me great insight into the Wooden Boat Festival, and there was definitely, it's hard to describe the energy and the passion that was there. But I wanted to just make known that I made the delightful acquaintance of George, from the president of the Oscar W, and we had a really lovely interaction and discussion, and but I wanted to congratulate you, Mayor Parkes, on that reception and your address to those that were present. It was, I thought it was just lovely. Thank you.
It's always easy to speak about things you love. Wooden boats are just it. That's anything else? No. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. We now have one confidential item.
South Coast Television, your community, your voice.